What's up everybody, Guy here with Weld.com. I'm one of your Canadian hosts and you can check me out at Sewing with Fire Welding. Now I'm pretty stoked to be here today because I unboxed a brand new Canadian made welder the other day and I'm here to show it off. So this is Canaweld's 231 SLM. It's a multi-process machine. You can do your stick, you can do your TIG, you can do your MIG, you can even hook up a spool gun to it. Let's check this thing out. All right folks, here it is, this nice shiny box. I bet you what's inside is nice and shiny. All right, so this is everything that came in the box minus the power source. Make sure that you activate the warranty by scanning that QR code. So once again, this is Canaweld's Multiprocess 231 SLM. Starting at the back, we've got some nice casters that are gonna mount to the bottom of our welder. It's got a nice little brake on it. Comes with all the hardware. And keep in mind that this is a dual voltage power source. So you've got your 115 volt and you've got your 230 connection on the welder. This is a multi-process machine, so it comes with everything you need to do your stick, to do your TIG, to do your MIG welding, even your flux core. So we've got our nice industrial stinger here. This is the alligator style with your typical DINS connector. Got your work lead or your ground clamp, same DINS connector on it. It's a medium duty MIG gun. Pretty comfortable if you ask me. We started unscrewing this, we got our tip and our diffuser in it, but the nice part is that it comes with a whole pack of tips. I've never seen that with a welder. So many tips, that's great. And different tip sizes. And we've also got different size drive rolls. We've got knurled for your flux core, and we've got what our V-groove for hardwire, which is pretty nice. Look at our TIG torch here. This is our typical Tweco TIG torch. We got our connection here. This is a quick connect, which is nice. And we've got our regulator and our hose to go with that. Again, another quick connect, which is a great feature. For TIG welding, we've got our whole pack of tungsten here. Good enough for 1/16 and 3/32. And we've got a pack of different collets and collet bodies and a few different size cups. And it even comes with a couple different tail sizes. So that's pretty sweet. All right, having a look at the back of this power source when we go to turn our machine on, whether we're connected to the 115 or the 230, we'll have to choose that on the back side of that power source. Now coming back to that quick connect on our shielding gas, that plugs into there nicely right here. Just like this, we pull back on this and it comes out that easy. All right, let's have a look at the side of our power source right now. This is where our wire goes in. We have the option of either an 8-inch or a 12-inch spool, and we've got the little adapter for that. We've got a nice little cubby here, and if we open this door, this is our drive roll system, and you can see here there's a few different functions. When we change polarities, this is called a bush bar, and we have to sort of change this here onto this pin if we want to run DC negative for flux core or anything like that. Moving down, we've got either the standard switch or spool gun. So if you've got the spool gun attached, you would have to change that over. We'll talk about burn back adjustment in a second. So this is a standard type wire feeder system. On the bottom here, you don't need a tool to change out the drive roll system. So that's pretty sweet. And we don't change the top drive roll. This is just a flat, and we can kind of put this down and lock that into place. We can adjust our tension right here like this. Now let's have a look at our burn back adjustment. Now, the burn back adjustment affects your wire stick out whenever you complete a weld. So basically, this tells the machine how long that wire is going to stay energized for after you finish welding. So if you want to turn up the burn back, basically that would increase your wire stick out. So if you're doing some tack welds and you don't want that wire sticking out too far, well, we can adjust this little dial. If you find that it's burning back too close into the tip, well, again, we can turn it down. Manufacturers usually recommend to have your burn back around 5. Now, depending on the application that you're doing, if you find that your wire is sticking to your plate whenever you finish welding, well, that would be a good opportunity to turn up your burn back. But be careful not to turn it up too much, because then it can create a big ball and even burn back into the tip. Okay, one thing I should note on the drive roll case here, if you're trying to open it up and you're just reefing on it like I did, you have to kind of push down on the top, and then when you do get it open, you're gonna see a little pin right here, and that pin sort of sits in that little hole, and that's what kind of holds it closed. So it's just something to look out for. All right, so before we get to doing some fun stuff like welding with this thing, because I want to try it out, let's talk about some of the technical aspects about this power source. So once again, this is Canaweld's 231 SLM multi-process machine. This will do your stick, it'll do your TIG, it'll do your MIG, it'll do your flux core, even do your gasless flux core, of course. Now, the two main advanced features on this power source is that it has synergic control and it has the job programming abilities. Synergic control really is kind of an added computer to this, where if we as the operator or the welder give it some information, it's going to spit out some parameters for us, and we don't have to go in there and set our voltage and our amperage or our wire feed speed, right? We can still do that if we so choose, but you have the option. So for the beginner, or for somebody that's just, doesn't really want to think too much, that's kind of an option for you. You're able to program past jobs in there, so if you have to go back and retrieve some information on some settings that you had from a previous job, you can go back and do that. Again, this is a 230 and 115 dual voltage power source. So the colored LCD screen allows you to toggle through different welding processes such as synergic MIG, manual MIG, stick welding, and then you've got your help menu. It also has a built-in polarity changeover feature for most common gases and gasless wires. It also features a TIG lift arc start. It has a professional 30mm drive roll wire feeding mechanism and comes with sealed dust-proof cabinet. It also comes with replaceable double groove drive rolls, and no tool is needed for changeover. You also have the option of the 8-inch spool or the 12-inch spool of wire. Okay, when it comes to MIG welding, you have the full control of your voltage and your wire feed speed settings on here. It also has a burn back setting and an inductance control. Now on the trigger, if you decide to weld continuous, it has the 2T and the 4T trigger lock option. Now when it comes to TIG welding, of course you have your amperage control, but it also has a downslope setting, and that's where if you want to taper off at the end of your weld, you have that feature. It also has the 2T and the 4T mode. Now when it comes to stick welding, it has your arc force control and a wide selection of electrodes. Finally, it has a heavy-duty power switch metal face panel, and for tougher conditions, it was tested in 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius. It complies with the international standards, IEC, and CSA Canadian standards. It also has a comprehensive 3-year warranty. All right, let's talk about the power source itself and the important information we all want to know, like amperage output and duty cycle. So this will give you 220 amps max, and at about 200 amps, it'll give you 20% duty cycle. If we drop that down to 130 amps, it'll give you 60%, and at 120, it'll give you 100%. So 7018 electrode, on stick welding, 120 amps. You're wondering what duty cycle is. Well, it's the maximum amount of time a machine can run for at maximum output before it has to shut down. So if we're saying 200 amps at a 20% duty cycle, out of 10 minutes, it can run for 2 minutes straight, and then it has to shut down for 8 minutes and calm down. So as the amperage decreases, the duty cycle increases. Okay, so the first thing I noticed when I turned this machine on is that we've got actually a nice color screen, right? So it's got some nice colors there, and it brings us right to the beginning, and we have the option of choosing our process here. On the far left, we've got our MIG Synergic. We're gonna talk about that a little bit later, but then we've got our manual MIG, we've got our TIG option, we got our stick, and then we've got the help option here. So anytime we want to choose one of these, we click down on the center button. So here we have the choice of our units. It'll tell us which version, and then if we want to kind of go back to the factory settings, we can do that here. Anytime you want to return back to that previous menu, you push and hold that center button and it'll take you back. All right, let's continue looking at the face of this. So obviously we've got our screen. On the left here, we've got our amperage for your stick and TIG. And then this is also your wire feed speed for MIG welding or flux core or any wire feed. Down low, you've got your button here, and this is to save. You can save up to 9 presets in this power source. So if you want to retrieve some settings of a project you did in the past, you can come back and go through that. Well, we're going to go through that in 1 second. Up at the top right, we've got our voltage. However, this also controls your arc force for stick, and it also controls your downslope for TIG welding. Now, just below, we have something called your inductance. Now, if we increase our inductance, is what that's going to do. It's going to give us less spatter. It's going to give us more metal flow. It's going to spread out that puddle a little bit. So this side here would be more suitable for thicker plate. But when we want to weld something thin, we turn it all the way to the left. Well, that's going to give you sort of a more narrow kind of pinpoint accurate weld, and this is more suitable for thinner plate. So let's keep going down. Obviously this is our center button. We just went through this. We've got our connection for our TIG torch and our spool gun. We've got our gas line right here. We've got our negative and we've got our positive terminal. And then this is where we're going to connect our MIG hose. All right, let's talk a little bit more about these settings. Actually, before I do that, you can see that the fan sucks in from the front and from the side and blows out from the back. So that's a pretty nice feature. I've had welders that blow out from the front, and you know that can cause a bunch of trouble with MIG or TIG welding. It can displace your shielding gas, so we don't want that. So let's just say I want to do some stick welding today. I've got a 7018 rod. This is 332 in diameter, and I want to weld on some 1/8 plate. Okay, so I've got a plan here. I'm going to run this machine. I'm going to do some stick welding. I'm going to do some flux core, and I'm going to do some TIG welding. I've got myself a groove weld right here with a backing bar. So this has a square side and a bevel side. So this is similar to your CSA 47-1 carbon steel plate test. So I'm going to start off doing this with some 7018. I'm going to run some stringers. I'm also going to do a little bit of weaving on this. And then once we fill this up, we'll go into some flux core and do some fillet welds with the TIG. Now you may notice I got a few extra layers on right now, considering I am in one of the coldest capital cities in the world. It's still pretty cold in the shop right now, but we're warming up. All right, so let's have a look at this machine. All right, so of course I'm going to set this to stick. It's going to tell me that I'm electrode positive. Ground goes into the negative. Click this again. We got the 70 series. I'm welding with a 7018. This will be a 1/8 electrode. It's going to ask me my material thickness. Now, because my backing bar is 1/4 inch, I'm going to set it to 1/4 inch, and it's going to give me a range of up to 130, even a little bit more. But I think I'm going to set this guy probably about 125 for my roots, and my arc force, I'm going to set it right in the middle. And that's all I'm gonna need. Okay, so as always, I've got my safety glasses and I've got my welding gloves that I need. I've got long sleeves, right? No synthetics, cotton, wool, or leather. I'm welding with a shade 10 on my ESAB Sentinel helmet, and that should be good enough for this here. Okay, so one thing I like to do before I get fired up is just really to warm up on some plate. And that's exactly what I did here. I kind of just simulated, you know, what I would have on a groove weld. And, you know, I came in and I put a nice little fillet weld in here. And this thing looks pretty good. That was running smooth. I was at about 125 amps. You know, I kept a nice tight arc length and I ran right through there, and that went in well. So we're gonna carry on with that setting. All right, with my plate all tacked up and nice and clean, I'm gonna run a 5/16 fillet weld up that square side, and then I'm gonna do a little bit of a weave, and that's gonna sort of marry that backing bar and that fillet weld. Keep in mind, we're welding with a 7018, 1/8 of an inch. Once I fill this, I'm gonna give this a nice cap with probably about 4 welds. All right, I'm lighting up and nice and comfortable here. I'm keeping a nice tight arc and moving up that joint with a nice stringer pass. This machine's keeping a nice stable arc for me, and that's all I can ask for at this point. So make sure you get comfortable. This weld is a little bit longer. All right, so I got no complaints here. I'd say that weld went in pretty smooth. So now let's move on and let's do that weave. All right, carrying on here. I'm doing a weave now. There's no longer a stringer pass, and this is kind of like a herringbone weave, they call it. Kind of where I go quick across the middle and I pause on the sides. I'm not gonna make it all the way to the top with one rod, so I'm gonna have to do a tie-in. All right, you can see here I'm in perfect shape. I'm nice and flat, and I'm gonna get to filling and capping this. All right, so with my root pass is complete now, I'm running probably about 118, and my arc force is at about 4. And I'm gonna try and test this machine out a little bit, you know, with a few different techniques. I'm gonna do some stringers for the cap, and I'm gonna keep weaving for here. So that's something I like to do to just see what the machine is capable of doing, all right? So let's get back to welding. All right, one pass at a time. I'm filling this plate up in stringer passes, and I'm making sure to clean my slag in between welds. And here you can see me welding at a few different angles here. Okay, this went very well. So you can see the finished product. Now let's move on to our flux core. All right, so once we've got our wire in and all that stuff and our little bush bar changed over, we can turn our machine back on. From the beginning, I'm gonna go into MIG Synergic. We're gonna go to flux core, self-shield. We'll hit enter. It tells me that I'm electrode negative. I'm welding with an 030 wire, but I'm gonna choose the 035 because that's the closest option. And I'm just gonna go on 2T mode, and we're welding 1/4 inch thick. And it's giving me my settings I need. So my inductance, probably keep it right in the middle. Let's fire this up. Okay, so as mentioned earlier, if you want to do some flux core welding on DCEN, you're going to have to transfer this bush bar over to this pin right here. I'm going to set my burn back probably around 5. I've got enough tension on my drive rolls right now for my flux core. I'm going to shut this little door. I got the 8-inch spool on there right now, and I'm welding with an 030 wire. All right, with my machine set for about 1/4 inch, I'm gonna warm up on some plate here. I've already got some weld metal down, but then I'm gonna move into, you know, some different shapes. This stuff here is probably about 1/8 of an inch in thickness. I've got some rusty plate that I'm gonna clean up on, and I've even got some, you know, clean 1/4 inch, flat bar. This is 2 inch, by 6 inches long. So my settings are set for 1/4 inch. That's a good starting point. Now I may have to tweak this a little bit. I may have to adjust my voltage up or down. I may have to play with the inductance a little bit, if I want to flatten that bead out, or if I find I'm getting too much spatter, right? Those are adjustments we can make after we've tested it out on our plate. All right, since we're doing flux core, it's a wire feed process. It's important to always cut that little wire off, but let's just say we don't have our pliers hanging around. If you draw that out a little bit, you can always pull on this wire and then fold back and forth, and that'll snip it off for you. That's the nice thing about soft wires. All right, with my pipe and plate tacked up, I've got it nice and clean. I got all that grime and that rust off of the plate. I've got 3 nice little tacks that I've feathered out. That's gonna hold it down while I weld. I'm gonna drag the puddle on this first pass. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't push flux core. It's a matter of preference, but just make sure we're staying at the leading edge of the puddle. If we are gonna push, we don't wanna risk any slag inclusions or anything like that. All right, so there's the first little section of my flux core. Not too bad, let's tie into that. All right, point and shoot on this crater. I decided to drag the puddle through on this, and I'm doing a bit of a stepping motion, and that's gonna blend in nicely into that pipe until I get all the way around to the backside. All right, so that wasn't too bad. There's my single pass pipe on plate. Now let's move on to some lap joints. All right, here I've got a couple old base plates tacked up that we're going to use as lap joints. This is made out of 3/16 material. So we're going to do a single pass on a couple. Maybe I'll do a multi-pass. I don't know yet. We'll see what this thing can do. All right, once again, I'm going to click on Synergic MIG. We're doing flux core, self-shield. Plugged in the negative already, same wire, 2T. My material thickness this time, I'm going to keep it at about 3/16. I've got my inductance set to about 4. And on my previous weld, I ended up turning up the burn back a little bit. So I'm sitting at about 6 on that. So here you can see Synergic MIG. We've got 2T mode. There's no gas, flux core shielding, size of wire, and then size of material. Okay, so with my burn back setting set to about 6 and my wire feed speed set to 272 and voltage to 20.7, inductance at 4, I was able to get an all right little lap joint in. That's a multi-pass. Remember, that's 3/16 plate. Okay, since stick welding and flux core can be a pretty messy process, I'm going to take the time to clean up and make my work area nice and tidy because I'm going to be doing some TIG welding now. And I'm going to take the time to change over my gas because I'm going to need some straight argon for that. And you can see here I'm going to connect with the quick connect in the back of the Canaweld welder. Okay, since we're going to do some TIG welding now, we got to change our bush bar back over to this terminal here. So I've already loosened it up with my 11/16. All right, with my power source turned back on, I'm going to keep my finger on this button here and it's going to go back to the beginning, go back to that home menu. And this is where I'm going to select TIG. I'm going to scroll through this. I'm going to hit TIG. Now it's going to tell me that my torch needs to be plugged into the negative and that my ground needs to be plugged into the positive. Now I'm going to take my torch here. I got a few connections to make. Start by connecting my DINs. Make sure that that's nice and tight. Now I have my electrical, which connects right here. And by the way, this is the same connection for the spool gun. Okay, we want to give that a bit of a wiggle while we connect these types nice and tight. All right, let's keep going. So I'm welding with a 332 tungsten today, and I want to be on 4T mode. That's where I'm going to click the button. It's going to stay on, and then I'm going to click it to turn off. Okay, I'm going to be welding on 1/4 inch, and it automatically gives me my settings. Now I can play around with my post flow setting if I'd like. All right, folks, so now that I've got my torch and everything set up, I'm good to weld. I just did a few little practice passes on this. The one thing I noticed about this torch is that it strikes very nice. You know, the lift arc option on it is pretty clean, and it holds a pretty good puddle. The arc is pretty stable on this, so I'm happy with that. I've got some T-joints, and I've got a few lap joints on that same base plate material that I was using. Now, I got to grind my mill scale off completely before I start welding. Now, I'm welding with a 1.5% lanthanated tungsten. I like this tungsten because I'm able to weld on AC, I'm able to weld on DC with it, right? So my 1/4 inch plate, my machine tells me, you know, somewhere between 160 and 130. I'm gonna start on the lower end and play around with that, and we're gonna put some single passes in. I'm welding with an ER70S-2. Now, this is very similar to your MIG filler metal, but it's a -2 instead of the -6 that we usually use. All right, let's get going. All right, I've got a T-joint set up here. That's what we're gonna start with. Got the mill scale ground down. It's really important. I can't stress that anymore. Keep that material clean. It's really gonna affect your weld. I'm gonna go in and sort of just do this little dip technique, and that's gonna be the first weld I put in. I'm probably gonna get into some multi-passes afterwards, but let's just start with the root. I've got a 3/32 filler metal. Now, we don't have a foot pedal with this machine, so we're gonna initiate the arc by pushing this button. Because we're on the 4T mode, I'm gonna hit that once and it's gonna weld continuous. Now, the way I'm gonna start the arc is I'm gonna put my tungsten up to the plate, I'm gonna hit that button and I'm gonna lift, and that's gonna initiate the arc for us. All right, folks, so I just finished my fillet welds on my T-joint, and I gotta say that I'm starting to get used to this torch, starting to get used to this button. It's actually kind of nice not having a foot pedal to drag around. This is just another option. Not that one is better than the other. I just never used it before. So you can see that my second weld has improved from my first weld just by getting comfortable with that torch and positioning myself differently. So I'm gonna do a multi-pass now, and we're gonna keep welding. All right, now with that multi-pass T-joint done, we're gonna move on to this lap joint, and we're gonna sort of just put a single pass in here and see what we're gonna do with this. Now, I've actually run out of mild steel filler, so we're gonna use a little bit of 309, and that's a carbon to stainless. All right, here's something I just wanna talk about that I kind of skipped over earlier, and this is my slope setting. So whenever I terminate the weld, that's gonna sort of taper off, and I have an option anywhere between 0 and 10 on this, and how much that's going to taper off. That's sort of the speed of it. I'm going to set mine to about 5. I'm doing carbon steel, so it's not all that critical, but I was wondering why my puddle was getting a bit of a pinhole at the end of it, and then I realized that I had my slope set to 0, so that means that I was cutting the arc off immediately as soon as I hit that button. So at least now it's going to taper down a bit. All right, so that was my last weld here. I'm just finishing up on that 1/4 inch, or I should say 3/16 plate. I even went ahead and did a whole bunch on the stainless right here. I've got some 1/4 inch, and I've got some 1/16 lap and T-joints. So these turned out really well. Let's have a closer look at them. All right, here we can see the finished product. There's our multi-pass done with the stainless 309. And that was our carbon steel. These ones turned out pretty good. And if you flip it over, we'll see some more work over here. There's our single pass. Again, another single pass here. That nice and pretty. And then I took the liberty of going ahead and welding some stainless with it. And that was our 1/16 lap joint. You can see our T-joint over here. Same thing over here. And I've got my lap joint multi-pass on the 1/8 stainless. So these all turned out pretty good. Good gas coverage. Got some really nice color in there. So pretty happy with that torch altogether. All right, everybody, that is Canaweld's 231 SLM multi-process machine. So remember, the combination of synergic control and job programming makes this welder attractive, not just to the new person starting out, but also that experienced welder. You know, we can program jobs, save you some time, ultimately save you some money. Time is money. So thank you for watching. Be sure to give myself some love at Sewing with Fire Welding, Weld.com. And if you haven't checked out that Weld app yet, please do so. We got a global welding community going on. This is the social media platform for welding and the trades, but there's so much more going on that. We've got a marketplace, we've got giveaways, we've got premium content. We can post questions and get answers to them in a timely manner. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep those lenses clean.